I don't believe in family curses. And when I get done, I think you too will agree with this point that I'm going to make. These are really family patterns. And what do I mean by patterns? I'm saying that these are behaviors or things that have been handed down from generation to generation, and then the family has accepted it or reached a point that it is normalized. And so now someone has a child and it doesn't come as a surprise because the father has left, and they say, well, that's what the men in the family do. Hi, I'm Dr. Gary O. White, and welcome to the Dr. G.O. White Show. Today, we're going to talk about family patterns versus what you always hear about the family curse. Family curses is something that's become so common, and then you hear people say that I want to break the family curse. But what are some of the curses that we began to hear, right? That no one stays married in the family. All the men left. That's what men do. Or, family curse, domestic violence is in this family. We're just kind of cursed. Or everyone drops out of school. Or, no one holds a good. These are curses a lot of times that we hear people say, or that's the term that we hear people say, is that it's a family curse. Or we never see men live past 60, right? These are oftentimes things that we understand or we interpret it as being a curse. But I'm going to tell you, I don't believe in family curses. And when I get done, I think you too will agree with this point that I'm going to make. These are really family patterns. And what do I mean by patterns? I'm saying that these are behaviors or things that have been handed down from generation to generation, and then the family has accepted it or reached a point that it is normalized. And so now someone has a child and it doesn't come as a surprise because the father has left, and they say, well, that's what the men in the family do. Those are patterns. It's not something that's embedded into the DNA. So I'm arguing that these are patterns, and when we understand them, then it gives us something that we can do to rewrite the narrative, or give us something that we can do to break the pattern, because they're behaviors. They're not a curse. When you look at something as being a curse, you are acting as if it's something that's beyond, or it's mythical, or it's something that's spiritual, or like a possession, that nothing that we can intercede and change to break. But we have to break them by understanding them, right? Children repeat what they see. And so as a child, you saw how families communicated. As a child, you saw how families conflicted. And then you began to enter your relationships, and then on to adulthood. And now you're repeating it. And so now you're taking it or accepting it as being a part of the curse. But you have modeled rather than modified an unhealthy behavior or an unhealthy pattern that has existed in the family. So don't look at them as being a curse. Look at them and really take a closer look to understand how we are repeating a same behavior that has existed, and it reaches a point that no one responds to it, or no one acts to block or to stop that behavior. So then we began to look and realize that when we have accepted it as a curse, and now we're moving forward, and we reach a point, and some people began to even explain to their children, you're going to get in a relationship, man, leave. And so we reach the point we have to break some of these patterns and begin to take a position that it's unacceptable. So here's why we must treat them differently. Number one, patterns can be interrupted. Curses can't. Patterns can be changed. Curses can't. Patterns can be mapped. They can be tracked, they can be named, they can be modified, and then they can be interrupted. Curses, again, is something that's beyond one's control. And so, again, we're moving to begin to see sort of like the differences, right? Patterns make the idea of change possible. Curses, you reach the point that you can change, or you think that it's not possible to change. But when we look at it, change is possible. And it begins with you making the individual decision on how you want to change that pattern within the family. Community support, mentoring, and modeling tools are key to breaking a pattern. Now, you know that it's a pattern when someone from the outside comes in and look to see how your family is behaving in a certain way, and you're calling it a curse, and someone's saying, no, that ain't a curse, that's a pattern. You're doing the same thing that your father did, and your father's doing the same thing that his father did, but it's a specific behavior. Now, it does differ. Now, alcoholism is not a curse. Substance abuse or someone that's vulnerable to addiction is not a curse. That just means that within your family, embedded within your DNA, that your family may be prone to addiction. Now, these things can be interrupted or disrupted as well. If you come from a family that alcoholism has ran through your family, that means that it is quite possible, physiologically speaking, that you may be susceptible to alcoholism. But again, that's not a curse. That's also something that's part of who we are, how we move, and patterns that are predictable and can be interrupted. And so let's begin to take a look at how we begin to move these things and to disrupt them in a healthy and positive way. Name the pattern. Number one, name the pattern without shame and avoid the labels. Uncle just crazy. That's all it is. No, name the pattern. Well, your brother, he just like his daddy and he just like his grandfather. They love putting their hands on women. That's just what the men in the family do. No, disrupt the pattern. Right? So you're taking a step forward now to interrupt it and recognizing it within yourself. Reflect on what you've learned when you began to study it. As a therapist, one of the things that I do in sessions oftentimes is we do something called the geniogram. That means that there's these patterns in terms of a square representing the man and the circle representing the woman. And then we have all these different symbols that we use to look at how the relationship, whether or not there's strain in the relationship, whether there's issues of substance abuse in the family, whether there's issues of mental health in the family. And so as a genealogist or someone working with a geniogram, we put together this map in couple sessions so that we began to physically lay eyes on the pattern. So now you're going to see that this is an issue as a pattern, behaviorally speaking, that has moved across the generations. When we see it, when we name it, when we can label it, it makes a difference. Also, we have to recognize a difference between a pattern and a curse is because patterns is something oftentimes embedded, instilled with us in our childhood. Right? Adverse childhood experiences are things that have occurred to us that then becomes locked into or impact our relationships, how we engage with each other, right? So patterns within the family from our childhood then makes it into our adulthood. And now how we're even communicating in the family is associated with patterns, but we'll tend to call them a curse. And so now we'll label it that this is a scapegoat. Right? This is the black sheep. There's always the black sheep in the family, right? That's your family is just cursed with the black sheep. And so now, again, as a pattern, we're recognizing that we're treating people in our family different from how they normally are. Even that, embedded in it, represents a pattern rather than a curse. Now, this piece here of disrupting the two or making the distinction between the pattern and the curse also moves to the point of notice your own triggers. One of the things I often say in terms of the real movement towards change is to start with myself, then the family, cover the block onto the community. That means that I am going to do an inventory of my own behaviors, my own thought process. I'm going to do an inventory of my own understanding of the role of past traumas or adverse childhood experiences, how they show up into my life. So I start with myself and say that I'm going to make the change. So the disruption of the pattern then shows up in me making the decision to cause the individual change. That's what it looks like. So it doesn't matter if all the men in my family or all the men in your family have left after their child was born or left after 10 years, that I make the individual decision. You make the individual decision to do something differently. That's what makes patterns workable. Curses are not workable. So commit to disrupting the pattern. Commit to doing better Commit to creating the kind of changes that need to occur within your family. Don't buy into the notion that these are curses. Don't accept believing these myths and how they show up in your families, because when you do begin to recognize them, you're now causing a generational change within your own family. So we're not cursed, we've just been patterned. And the patterns are something that I take the strong stance is that it needs to be broken. And so I'm going to say to you, do your inventory, have your family meetings, have the conversations about the patterns, and remove from the vocabulary of the family the notion of a curse. I'm Dr. Gary O. White, and this is your health moment as we just removed the notion of a curse, and now we're building new patterns for healthy relationships.